Recording in progress.
Good morning. Welcome to the October 17th, 2024 Architectural Review Board City of Palo Alto morning hearing. Can we please take a roll call?
Chair Rosenberg,
Present.
Vice Chair Chen,
Present.
Board Member Adcock,
Present.
Board Member Balte, Board Member Hirsch.
Present.
We have a quorum.
And I do believe Board Member Balte will be joining us. I believe he's just running a few minutes late. So when he arrives, we'll note that in the minutes and have that for future reference. All right. At this time, we open the hearing for public comment. This is for anyone who'd like to speak on an item that is not on the agenda for today. If you have comments about an agendized item, you may have time for that later. So this is specifically for comments from the public that are not on agendized items, and each person would have 3 minutes to speak. Do we have any speaker cards or raised hands?
I have no request to speak.
Okay, thank you. Agenda changes, additions, deletions. And this is specifically for this meeting.
Good morning.
Stephen.
We do have a deletion here. So this is for action item, or should I say former action item, number 3. So that was publicly noticed for this meeting and it will be rescheduled and heard at a later time. So it's a agenda deletion.
Perfect. So we just have the one public hearing for 4075 El Camino Way today and not for 762 San Antonio Road.
Correct.
Perfect. Thank you. I'd also like to just on a note from the chair, we during our pre-hearing meeting on Tuesday this week, we went over some items, very sort of minor procedural quirks that we're trying to tidy up a little bit of. So I now have my nifty little cheat sheet for how to get through this meeting, and we'll be doing our disclosures slightly differently. So just very minor stuff, and we'll just see how it goes from here. But just so you guys have a heads up, there's some slight differences in how and when we're going to be asking for comment, and how and when we're going to be asking for disclosures. So we'll all be fine though. All right, so city official reports, and that goes over to Stephen as well.
Good morning. Stephen Schweitzer here, the historic preservation planner and the new ARB liaison. So as for tentative future meetings, we have 5 more meetings left in this year, including this one. The more detail that we can provide is the upcoming November 7th meeting, where we tentatively have scheduled 3150 El Camino, which will be a streamlined housing development review, as well as 70 Encina Avenue, which is a PC rezoning. As for the November 21st meeting, we have 3265 El Camino Real, and that is a PC rezoning, a second hearing, and another second hearing for the property located at 824 San Antonio Road. As for new projects, we did have one project come in. I believe it was October 8th, and that is listed in the packet. If we get to it on packet page 13, going into packet page 14. So that's located at the address 3997 Fabian Way, and it's a request for a streamlined housing development review. So we did also include in the packet some of the tentative meeting dates for the following year, since we're encroaching on the end of this year. So those are for your review and information. And with that, I can take any questions from the board.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to ask for the board members at this time, if you have any, since we're getting into the holiday season, if you guys have any planned absences, now would be a great time to share those. So I have none on the calendar for the rest of the year that I can think of. So does anyone else have any planned absences?
None that overlaps with any ARB meetings.
Perfect.
No, not for me.
Nothing. Okay, great. Excellent.
And if I may, through the chair, if you do have any planned absences, feel free to reach out to staff, as well as myself and Veronica. So
Great. Thank you very much. And just a quick look at next year. I appreciate that you guys have brought next year's agenda so early on so that we can see everything for next meeting as well. That's incredibly helpful. Okay, I think with that, I mean, I wanted to just touch base very quickly, just to my other board members. We've got a few of these SB 330s / builders remedies projects that are still percolating through. So we will be seeing a few more of those, but just as a heads up is that once this batch with maybe a couple other stragglers getting through, once the batch of the builders remedies gets through, we won't see those anymore. So the SB 330s continue, but the builders remedies will not, because we now have our standards in place. So just as a heads up for that, we've got, I believe, somewhere in the order of 8 to 12. I'll throw that number out there, of those left. So we'll see a few more of those, but after that, that should be sort of the end of those. Okay, please.
Are we going to assign reviewers to see those projects when they come in?
Yes, so when those guys come in, and we know that they're coming up shortly, I'm of the opinion that once we see them on the agenda a few weeks out, then we should start doing the ad hoc, because really the pre-review is really just to review for completion, nothing more. There's zero judgment there. It's really just to make sure that we are reviewing something that makes sense, that has enough information that we would be able to adequately review it. So at this time, we've got a lot of them already sort of specified with our I don't know if we should call it an ad hoc or a pre-review, one of the two. We typically call it an ad hoc. But most of those are agendized. Everything that's on the future meetings that's in short-term future is agendized with the pre-review. So we should be okay with that, but good question. Okay, and with that, we still have no Peter. So we're going to go ahead and get started on action item number 3. Excuse me, action item number 2. Okay. All right, action item number 2, it's a public hearing quasi judicial for 4075 El Camino Way. Recommendation to applicant's request for an amendment to a planned community zone district PC 5116 to allow for modifications to an existing 121 unit assisted living and memory care facility. The additions would include 16 additional assisted living units and 172 square feet of additional support space. The recommendation by staff is staff recommends that the architectural review board take the following actions. Recommend approval of the proposed project to city council. So to city council, not to the head of staff, based on findings and subject to conditions of approval. Now, as a reminder to my fellow board members, this is the second time we'll be seeing this project. And if you guys have any questions, we do have the sample board right here next to me. At this time, we're going to ask board members specifically, and good morning, Peter, just in time. Now I'm going to stall for 30 seconds for Peter to get settled. We've got coffee here for you as well. So at this time, we're going to ask that if you have visited the site, would you please raise your hand and Veronica will take note of it. So if you visited the site this week recently for the purpose of this project, please raise your hand. Okay. Previous time is fine. So this time, previous time, raise your hand. Okay.
Previous time.
Everybody's visited. Perfect. So all members of the board have visited the site, at least on the previous time, if not on this most recent time. Now we're going to ask for any additional disclosures that you may have in regards to this project. While you were visiting the site, you spoke with anybody, if you've had any outside hearings or meetings with anybody else. So at this time, I have nothing to disclose.
Nothing. Nothing.
No additional disclosures.
No.
Great. Thank you guys very much. And so that is the minor difference, as mentioned previously, for how we're going to deal with disclosures. We're going to ask about the site first, disclosures separately. And now at this time, I'll hand it over to staff for their presentation. Thank you.
I was about to share my screen and then I navigated to a different tab and now it won't let me go back.
Give Emily a few minutes here. Jennifer, if you don't mind, do you remember the date of the previous time we reviewed this project?
July 18th.
July 18th. I was trying to ask her so that you could focus on what you were doing.
But she knows
I
off the
had
top
it.
of her
I
head.
know. July 18th. All right. So just so it's fresh in everyone's memory, and if you want to turn back to your own personal notes, July 18th. Thank you very much. It's 2 seconds.
Thank you for bearing with us.
All right, great. Thanks very much. Please get started when you are ready.
Thank you. Sorry about that. My name is Emily Callis. I'm the project planner for 4075 El Camino Way. This is a planned community project. As Chair Rosenberg explained in the intro, this is the amendment of a planned community zoned project to allow for the addition of 16 assisted living units to an existing 121 unit assisted living and memory care facility. The prior approvals are PC number 5116 and 3775. And as a reminder, the assisted living use does not qualify as a housing development project for the sake of those state laws. As a reminder, this is located on El Camino Way. It backs to the single-family neighborhood along Wilkie Way. The project also has some frontage towards West Meadow Drive. And this property has two senior living facilities on it. One is the Avant, which is independent senior living, and then Palo Alto Commons, which is the subject of this project. PC projects go through a long process with a lot of hearings. So where we are today is the second ARB hearing. We are asking for a recommendation today. After this, it will go to the Planning Commission for a recommendation and then to Council for the final decision. And as always, public comments are accepted at all public hearings and throughout this process. At the prior ARB meeting, the ARB recommended the following project modifications: an increase of landscape screening with neighbor input, preparation of a transportation demand management plan, for the plans to be updated to show the neighbor in context and modifying the window design to meet the objective standards for privacy, and to address noise concerns from the neighbors regarding existing and proposed equipment. In terms of landscape screening, Palo Alto Commons held a neighborhood meeting on August 22nd, and that input has been incorporated into the plan set. However, we have received additional neighbor comments, particularly regarding consideration for native species and potentially more use of evergreen trees. And so we expect that this will be continued to be refined with neighbor input. A TDM plan was submitted in September and is still under review with the Office of Transportation. It will be finalized before the project is ready to be approved, but we don't believe that it would affect your ability to give a recommendation today. The plans also show that the parking spaces have been designated for visitors, staff, and residents. But this is still within review with the Office of Transportation. For privacy measures for windows, the plans have been modified so that most windows in the units are at a 45-degree angle compared to the neighboring single-family residences. Most of the windows that are parallel to the property line have 5-foot tall windowsills. But I wanted to call attention that there is one third-floor window about 21 feet from the property line, which is parallel to the property line. There is existing mature landscape screening. And because this is the primary window for the living area of this unit, we don't believe it would be appropriate for that window to be removed. In terms of noise mitigation, 3 new heat pumps are proposed. The noise study that was prepared prior to the last meeting has been modified to reflect this one additional unit, but the analysis remains the same, that this will not increase noise level for residents. These heat pump units are set towards the middle of the building. As you can see, this one is 55 feet away from the property line, from the property line, and that's typical for the other three as well. And the vents will be pointed up and away from residents. A number of neighbor comments have been provided both in the packet and by email yesterday. In general, some of the neighbor comments included individual recommendations for changes to the screening foliage, continued concern about parking, particularly as it may relate to the bike lane expansion along El Camino Real. Some neighbors wrote to why they do not believe that this project meets comprehensive plan or zoning policies, particularly for neighborhood scale and high quality design, and then reiterated the conversation we discussed at the last meeting regarding how the daylight plane is calculated. This project has been determined to be exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. A section 15301 categorical exemption has been prepared. The staff recommendation is for the ARB to recommend approval to the City Council based on the draft conditions of approval and draft findings. This concludes my presentation, and the applicant has also prepared a presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Very briefly, I'd like to ask if the ARB has any questions of Emily or staff at this time in regards specifically to anything that was in the presentation just now. Do you have any questions for her at this moment?
I just want to confirm that because this is a PC amendment, the final decision will go to City Council.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'll allow the applicant. You have 10 minutes for your presentation. Please state and spell your name. And looks like we've got some, okay, all set. Please state and spell your name and begin when you are ready. Thank you. She's got to turn you on. Hang on. Turn the microphone on.
Good.
There we go.
So my name is Daniel Bowman, DANIEL BOWMAN. I am the architect for the project. And so we are, as they stated, a senior housing project with assisted living and memory care. On the slides, you could see the existing courtyard for the phase one renovations is with the color scheme that we were proposing, with one change being the blue we toned down so that it's not as bright for the neighbors. But that is pretty much the color scheme for the project. Next slide. So yeah, as staff stated, we are asking for amendment to the PC with additional 16 units, which the city has stated that they are more than willing to allow more housing units, just as long as it meets the neighborhood context, which we believe that we have addressed with these meetings. And then we are also asking for a 2-foot encroachment onto the setback on the Goodwill side. So it's the back side of the Goodwill. They haven't given any public comments or anything. So we don't believe that they will be opposed to that. That will allow us to move some of the units away from the Wilkie Way single family homes and move it towards the commercial side of our building. And then the change to the exterior color scheme. Next slide. So with this view, you can see that where we're proposing the addition. So this view is taken from the Wilkie Way side. And then there are additional units, I believe 7 units on the other side of the building. Next slide. So we are no longer asking for an exception to the daylight plane. We will not be going into that. We are trying to adhere to that so that the Wilkie Way residents doesn't have as much impact to their property. Next slide. So as you can see, these are the existing photos, and there are a bunch of landscape trees back there. So we are also proposing to add more trees on, if you could see the upper right corner, there is the grass there. We're proposing that to add trees there to help screen the building more. Next slide. So this is the landscape plan that we have updated. So we added more trees, and then we also met with the neighbors to get their feedback. One of their feedback was to move the trees closer to our building so that we don't provide as much shade onto their property, but still screen our building. The green trees on the plan are evergreen trees, and then the purple ones are deciduous trees. And so for most of the building, it is now going to be covered with those evergreen trees. Next slide. So for the screening, we have updated our windows to be in compliance with the IR guidelines that you guys recommended. And so that's either the windows are at 45 degrees or have a 5-foot sill, and then the one window is screened by trees, as staff mentioned. And then regarding that window, it is also set back. So it's on the 3rd floor, but the 2nd floor roof is also screening since it's about 10 foot back from that parapet. Next slide. So the next 2 slides are going to be the shadow studies that we did regarding the building and the new landscape. So the building itself doesn't provide more shade, that much more, at least compared to the landscape that's existing and then the landscape we're proposing. And then regarding the landscape, the majority of the shade is going to be on our site, and it will have a minimal impact on shade on the neighbors' properties. And so these 4 shadow studies are, the top is existing, and then the bottom is proposed, and then this is March and June of the year. And then these ones are taken on December 21st, so this is going to be the most impact. But as you can see, the existing trees are already causing most of the property to already be in the shade. Next slide. So this is an elevation of our color scheme. So all the colors are the same except for blue. We've changed it to the frozen lake one so that it is less of an impact, as I said before. And then you guys have the colors in front of you, so you can see what they look like in person. Next slide. So here are some of the 3D elevations that you guys requested. The left one is the entry of our building. We're not proposing any additions there, but that's just the color scheme for that one. And then on the right is the 2 additional areas with 4 units on adjacent to the Goodwill side that we're proposing. And as you can see in the photos, that the Goodwill building abuts that property line, and that it's just to the back of side. They don't have any windows on that side. Next slide. And then this is going to be the elevations facing the Wilkie Way residents. So as you can see, the existing building steps back, and we're going to still provide that step back, just going to be less step backed. But our goal is to make it so that it's not just one giant mass of a building, but that it's broken up and fits more of a context of the neighborhood on that one. I think, yeah, you go to the next slide. And then this one is, we are on the memory care wing of the building. We're removing the 2nd floor balconies. This is because it's memory care and we can't have the residents on it. But it is also going to increase the privacy of the neighbors regarding the Wilkie Way neighbors. Yeah, and that's, I think, our project. We are hoping that you guys improve the project, and then we communicated with the neighbors and have updated our plans. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, at this time, we're going to hold off on ARB questions for the applicants. You may sit down for a moment. We're going to have public comment. We're going to have questions to public comment, and then the speaker is actually going to have a chance to rebut public comment. So that is part of our procedural bylaws that we have been, we need to make sure that we are adhering to. So at this time, I'd like to ask if there are any public comments for this project.
Yes, I have 2 speaker cards and 1 raised hand on Zoom. First speaker is Natalie Chu.
And Natalie, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Please state and spell your name for the record. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Natalie Chu. I live on Wilkie Way, and I actually have I have a couple of comments. One is if you're going to do this, I would love it if you would have more evergreen trees. I don't personally mind about the shade. I would rather have more privacy if possible. In fact, previously there was a very large tree in the courtyard, which the Palo Alto Commons abruptly chopped down one day without letting us know. And I don't really know why, but I don't know whether that was in advance of for this project. The second thing I'd like to talk about, which perhaps is not on your agenda, but which causes daily pressure for us living on Wilkie Way, is the parking situation. And I see that the applicant says that they would like 16 new units. The latest thing that's happened, as you know, is that the bike lane has closed on-street parking on El Camino Way. And we do have tremendous parking pressure. So, for example, I have been traveling, but I kept just for pretty much every day, our street is completely parked up. And my actual driveway is often blocked by cars. So I often have to leave notes saying you're blocking my driveway. Or a couple of times I've had to talk to the police about this. So just in the space of a couple of weeks, which I kept this record for, on September the 4th, a car blocked my driveway. On September the 10th, despite what Palo Alto Commons says, their staff very often parks on Wilkie Way. And I happened to see them leaving their car. A nursing aide was parking because she was wearing a uniform. And I talked to her very cordially and civilly. And I asked her why she was parking there. And she said there was no parking at the nursing home. She had been circling and she'd been told to park in the neighborhood. She was not employed by the nursing home. She said, I'm not an employee, but she said, I'm a private contractor. And so I believe that many of the residents have nursing aides or perhaps therapists who come to see them. So 3 days later, on September 13th, I just happened to run into another healthcare worker. And once again, I just asked, do you happen to work at the nursing home? And she's like, yes, I do. She said she didn't work at the home again. She said she works for Sutter, but she was going to see a patient there. And again, she said there was no garage parking available. She also had to park in the neighborhood. Later on the same day, September 13th, a different car blocked my driveway. And on September 28th, another car blocked my driveway. And that means actually blocking the driveway itself. So I sort of understand that because, we've got a fence running along, but people who live in the neighborhood understand that it's a driveway. That's just like 2 weeks worth of parking. It is a very real problem. And so if the applicant is going to add 16 units and says there aren't that many visitors, I think that's not quite true, because even if you don't have staff that's employed by the home, many people have aides, they have family who visit them. Besides which, I've also noticed in the last couple of weeks since they closed El Camino parking that we're getting Goodwill parking too. So Goodwill staff is also parking on our street. I've actually talked to other neighbors who are unable to attend this morning, and everyone says it's sort of like a musical chairs every day, like you can't park in front of your house because all these businesses are parking on Wilkie Way. So I'd really like if you could address that. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your comments. Next public speaker.
Yes, next is Yan Feng Wen.
And if you could please state and spell your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay. My name is Yan Feng Wang. I just show a picture, I don't know how to show on the screen. But I have this picture.
Unfortunately, we can't see those from the phone and that's,
Yeah,
in-
so how can
yeah, in future, we'll just have to email
Oh.
that into the city staff ahead of time.
Okay, this picture show, on the March 24
Mhm.
afternoon, 3 o'clock. Right now, the common have 2 trees already cover half of my backyard. So the shade already almost, 3
Mhm.
afternoon, 3 o'clock. The tree, the shade already cover half of my backyard. So I think in the future, we plant more tree, probably same as like this. And also, the tree plant to tall, the leaf only on the top. For the second floor, either, no use for to cover the window, to cover everything. So I don't think the tree for the privacy, right now already have the tree is not support the privacy. So that's and also my backyard, no grass, no sunshine. So I don't think that's a good idea. That's another question is the parking. It's really crowded. Other question is right now the building, the AC, the noise. The AC, the noise, the evening time, I downloaded some app on my phone. It show the summertime, the temperature has the AC, the noise is 60, 61, sometimes 62. This the summertime, the evening, and also the lunch time more heavy because the surround area also have. Evening time only the common, the building, they have the AC, the big, so the noise really heavy. So that's my concentrate, this problem. I have a noise, parking, right now the trees, cannot give privacy, but exactly cover my backyard, the sunshine for, 30%, the Bay Area, that's why I consider. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next public speaker?
Yes, I believe we have one more in person from Kevin G.
If you could please state and spell your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. My name is Kevin G, Kevin space JI. I'm a lifelong resident of 4072 Wilkie Way. And I have a couple different comments I'd like to make. So first, I submitted written comments, which I hope the ARB will take into consideration. In addition, I would like to discuss the engagement model with the applicant at this time. So they invited us over to talk about some of the shade and some of the other issues. And afterwards, we provided some feedback and asked that they provide us an example of what they would show before for ARB, just for additional comments. But we didn't really hear very much back. They just said, see you at the ARB meeting, which we think is a little bit, we'd like to agree on something before coming to ARB instead of making the public comments here, which I think is pretty reasonable as a neighbor. In addition, as you may recall last time, there was a significant noise issue. That has not been resolved either. We have seen no further addressment of that as well. And so we're a little bit worried about having them be a good neighbor in our backyard if we can't even get some of the concerns that we've already addressed. In addition to the parking, as you may know, they are also removing parking spaces over on El Camino, which we haven't heard what the repercussions of, like, how are they going to address the solution for that as well. Those are some of my concerns that I want to bring up since the last meeting. In addition, I still want to highlight that based on the municipal code, to my understanding, that there should be high to low density transitions, and that's what the current setbacks are, or step backs are. And having that removed would reduce the high to low density transitions, which are part of the municipal code as stated in my written comments. I also, excuse me, want to address the shade issue as well, which is that we oppose having additional shade causing more shade in our backyards. It's making it really hard to grow things. As a child, I used to garden in my backyard with my grandparents, and having more buildings that would cause more shade would significantly impact my ability to do so, which I'd hope to continue to do so. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about the daylight plane, which I know has been addressed before, but I want to talk about how the fact that the way we have 10-foot setback with 45-degree angle is both more aggressive against the neighborhood than both a normal residential building would be, like an apartment building by code, and a commercial building would be. And so I think I'm a little bit confused about why they kind of don't have to follow either of these two rules when it comes to the daylight plane. Those are all my comments at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Are there any other public speakers?
Yes, and then we have 2 raised hands on Zoom. First is from Mona.
Good morning, speaker. If you could please state and spell your name for the record, you will have 3 minutes to talk.
Hello. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
Hi.
yes, ma'am.
My name is Mona. I am a 4040 Wilkie Way resident. Hold on. Let me turn my another Zoom off because I was trying to. I am try to express this my strong opposition for the Palo Alto Commons expansion. My trying to address this, they were still actually in the design and code violations. I wrote email to the ARB board members, and so I hope you already see my written written email. Still, I'm trying to say is when they were put a 3-story buildings, all these 3-story, they were actually a refill. Then the previous one, the design is to follow the low density transition to higher density. The design, according to the municipal code, they were usually the current situation. There are steps up. So from the 1st story transition to 2nd story, then 3rd story. So currently they are just completely refill the steps. So it makes a completely a big gigantic block against all our Wilkie neighbors. This is clearly a violation. The municipal code 187202 A. And, and also there's a policy L61, L67, L68. Plus, there are there's still a height violation for this current design. So according to the municipal code 18.38.50E, this is supposed to be 3 feet height increase after the 6-foot distance from the property line. So this is still not addressed. I know you all are architect, either practicing or not practicing, but you are all architect. I'm trying to ask you if this is you're living in my house and you are the architect design for the Palo Alto Commons. Were you going to be designed like this to put a 3-story building right behind the residential neighborhood? That is, I want you guys to think about it. You're the architect. You are going to design this building. Where you're going to do this for your house live back right behind these buildings. One more thing is about the height. Okay.
Please finish your comments quickly, then we'll allow you to finish your final thought.
Okay. My last comment is about the shade, the trees. So the trees behind my house, the trees is really, really tall. Does cast a very strong shadows. However, the tree is over 3-story tall, and the trees and the lower part, the tree branches all been cut off because there are too close to my ADU in the back. So I have to cut off for the safety reason. So which this particular trees does not provide any privacy at all. All you see is a big gigantic trunk and then all the over 3-story tall, their leaves are there. So there's no privacy dressing for that particular tree. If they really want to do the landscaping, they should cut the tree and plant something differently. Currently in my backyard, there is no screening completely at all.
Thank you for your comments. Final public speaker?
Yes, next is from Jay Divkar.
If you could please state and spell your name for the record, you will have 3 minutes to speak.
Yes, hi. My name is Jayashri Divekar. I live on 4054 Wilkie Way. And as my fellow neighbors have already stated all the things, all the facts and the codes, I definitely agree to that. Privacy is the biggest issue, definitely. What I have 1 or 2 trees which are there in front of the rooms which I can see. But during fall, all the leaves are fallen down and I have nothing else to screen between the rooms and my backyard. Uh, I mean, and just putting the trees, I feel that's not the solution. I do not completely, agree to that because I have seen the other issues with the trees and the roots. They grew in my backyard. I had to deal with that. My concrete got destroyed because of the roots. I'm not happy with the tree option either. And overall, with the parking issue, that is also not resolved. They are trying to find some code which will suffice them minimally, but that's not the right way to do it. I think they really need to think and rethink about the expansion. I really oppose the expansion completely. And third, as I have always stated in my previous meetings, even though this is the architectural review, but still my value, my property value is going down all because of this. And I do not like that. And nobody will like it, right? If you are in my shoes, you will also think about the value of the property and not just the architectural commitments. That's all I think I can say right now. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other public speakers?
Those are all our speakers.
All right, thank you very much. At this time, just in case if any of the ARB members have questions for a specific public speaker, now would be your chance to ask that. Not seeing anything. So at this time, we'll move on to allow the applicant to have 10-minute rebuttal to any of those public comments that they'd like to address.
Good morning, board members and staff. My name's Charlene Kushner. I'm with WellQuest Living. We're the operational manager for both the Avant and Palo Alto Commons. Should I spell my name?
Please, if you don't mind for the record.
Charlene, Charlene, Kushner, Kussner, with WellQuest Living.
Thank you. Okay. And we do ask that this time not be used for an additional presentation, but really to address anything that was done in the public comments.
Perfect. I was just going to do that. So we have met with Wilkie Way neighbors extensively. We've had 5 community outreach meetings to date over this process of submitting plans and getting entitlements with the city. The last one being just recently, August 17th, after our ARB meeting. We had about 4 neighbors attending that meeting. It was mostly about landscape screening and ways we could rework the building to offer privacy for these neighbors, which we are really wanting to cooperate and do. And so we've had many email communications with many of them. And Kevin, respectfully, I just want to mention that, address his comment that we haven't been responsive. I have emails 8:30, 9:03, 9:04 two times, 9:07, 9:09, 9:19, 9:22, 9:26, 9:27, 10:06, 10:07 twice, 10:12. I have been in communication with these neighbors, sent an email outreach to all of them after our community outreach meeting, did have some responses, and we've been working back and forth with them, both with the landscape architect, our architect of record, and myself, trying to work out a workable solution, because some want trees, some don't. Some would like trees up next to the building, some would like them at their property line. So we really are taking all of these into consideration to meet their needs and to be good neighbors. As far as parking, we have completed our TDM plan, and we've been working in cooperation with that plan already. We have 20 staff members who are already carpooling. We have subsidized that. There is rewards from our company to carpool, to take the bus pass, to get a train pass, and we're offering those to our staff members because we do want to limit impacts to the environment. We want everyone to try to use mass transit when possible. And we have created a new parking scheme in our parking garage. I was there just yesterday, and there were 6 spots open in our garage, 2 spots open out front. So we're encouraging our staff to park in the garage in such a way that we leave adequate space for resident families, guests, to be able to park on our community. As far as sound mitigation, we have done noise studies for the PAC building, and they all fall below approved levels. We are working with one resident who lives behind the Avant, which is outside of this discussion, but we are working on a solution to mitigate noise coming from our pool and spa pump. And we are repiping, upsizing the piping, taking the piping around or up to the roof with a noise muffler to really mitigate that sound of the exhaust, which was permitted and approved during the Avant building process, but to be a good neighbor. We want to accommodate. It is noisy, and we want to make sure that that neighbor can enjoy his backyard and living in where he lives. So we really feel like we're working to address these issues with the neighbors. We want to be good neighbors with them. Do you want to speak on some response to some of their items?
Yeah, so I think she addressed most of them. The one that I wanted to add was the daylight plan that they mentioned. The reason it's the 10-foot and then 45 degrees is per municipal code, PC's pull from the adjacent property in this instance, and the adjacent property daylight plane is the 10 to 45 degrees. And so that's where that 10 foot up and then 45 degrees came from.
So we really love this building. We love what we offer to the community. We love our residents. We think we offer a great service to the local community for a housing solution. And so we also want to respect our neighbors and be good neighbors with them and be cooperative. So I think we're working in that way to mitigate everyone's concerns. And I'm here to address any other comments.
Thank you very much. Okay, at this time, we open the discussion to the ARB for questions for staff, applicant, anything like that. So this is time for all of your questions to be asked. Like to begin?
I may ask one quick
ahead.
question about parking. I know there's separate study TDM going on, but I'm just curious if in the parking study you've included not just the staff and visitor the family visitors, but also we heard from some of the neighbors that occasional therapists, what have you, who are not part of your employees. Are they also included in the parking study and accommodations?
Right now, I just confirmed with our executive director yesterday that we only have about 4 residents right now who use outside care providers. The majority of our residents are cared for by our own staff, so the TDM is for staff parking use. We are adequately parked, as per our studies have shown, for residents and guest parking. As you understand, most of our residents do not drive. We have one resident who has a car stored on the property. It's a classic car, but most of our residents do not drive. So we have parking spaces available for their families when they come to visit with them.
But I guess to follow up on that note, if you don't, sorry, hang out for just a second.
Yeah, sure.
On that note, do you guys have a process or procedure in place for when someone does come as an attendant? Is there a
Yes.
handout that you give them? Is there some sort of?
So we have signage placed in the parking lot now and at the garage entry where the gate is. We have a call box there. So the procedure is to actually park in the garage or out in front of the garage. There's 11 spaces in that kind of area just in front of the gate.
Okay.
And they can use the phone or call into the receptionist, and they're aware that we would open the gate and they could park inside behind the gate.
Great, thank you. And to follow up one more, this is for staff. Is there any sort of parking pass or anything on Wilkie Way? Is that something that may be explored, that the neighbors get free, parking passes for their own street, or is there anything like that that could help mitigate at this time? I know some other streets, have like, this is a neighborhood parking, you need this pass, and if you don't have this pass, you get ticketed or towed. Is there anything like that here?
So there are residential parking permit programs in some neighborhoods in Palo Alto. This is not one of them.
Okay.
That would be something that, would be kind of a separate project.
Of course.
Through the Office of Transportation that would also require council approval.
Okay, and is that something that the neighbors would request?
I would have to look into what the exact process is.
Perfect. Okay, thanks very much. And I believe David had some questions as well.
Could we clarify the daylight plane issues here? They were raising questions about the code issue relative to the daylight plane. Did you take note of the actual references, and do they apply here, or is it correct that the daylight plane is what we all know, 10 feet, 45?
Yes, so as we discussed at the previous meeting, and if it's helpful for me to dig up that PowerPoint slide, I'm happy to do so. But the daylight planes that the neighbor was referencing was the 10-foot and 45-degree angle daylight plane that was adopted as a part of the original PC for Palo Alto Commons that we have determined to be what is applicable to this property under the existing zoning. The 3-6 daylight plane, so a 3-foot rise for 6-foot run angle, is what is required for new planned community projects adjacent to single family residences.
Just for clarification, isn't a 3 and 6 the same thing as a 45-degree angle?
So
no, it's slightly shallower. So I can go ahead and find that diagram.
Okay, never mind. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
So you're saying that those codes are new codes that do not apply to this project? Is that what I'm understanding?
So the existing building was built with the 10-foot 45-degree in mind, and the shallower one would make existing parts of the existing building non-complying.
Yeah. So you make a decision at some point to go with the codes that were part of this project in the very beginning on the new parts to it. Is that correct?
Correct. We took the existing planned community regulation into account while looking at the proposed addition.
Okay, thanks.
Could you clarify, please, in the original PC approval, did it stipulate that the building had to conform to a daylight plane, or did it just stipulate the design of the building?
In the approved plans for the Palo Alto Commons building, I believe 1989, is the plans have daylight plane diagrams that show the 10-foot and 45-degree
Well, I
angle.
understand that, but my understanding is that a PC approval approves the building as it's designed rather than approving a set of zoning guidelines. That's the whole point of PC, is that you stipulate what you want to build. And I wasn't aware that there was a daylight plane for a PC kind of zoning. That seems to me counterintuitive. So I'm asking here, though, that this building was designed in this particular way with this particular arrangement of setbacks and terraces at the backside to provide privacy to the neighbors. Was it approved, though, with that design, or was it approved just provided it meted that daylight plane? Maybe that's too much reading into what happened back then, but.
Yeah, I mean, you are correct that the planned community zoning typically approves the building that is built. That is why the addition is in front of you today as a PC amendment.
Yeah. And that's sort of my follow-on question, is I want to be really clear that my understanding is that this is in front of us because this is different from the building that was originally built. Therefore, it's a change to the current zoning standard, regardless of how you parse it out. If it's a daylight plane or an FAR, what really is allowed is exactly what's there. And I want to see if you can put that on the record. Is that the case?
I'm going to jump in here and just say that yes, this is a change to the zoning designation since this site has custom regulations. And the previously approved zone did not include these additional units. And so you are looking at that. When staff reviews a project like this, we are looking for it to be consistent with the existing buildings on site. But because of the custom zoning, it does allow for, as it goes through these public hearings, the options for doing things that might not have been allowed with what the previous zoning had been or other standard zoning.
Exactly.
So that is correct.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. I was hopeful to get back to a question on the parking. To the applicant, please. As I look at your drawings and understand it, I'd say the bulk of your parking spaces, it seems 79, if I read correctly, are behind a gate in the back of it, and they're labeled as for residents. Is that correct?
Yes, with the intention that it's residents and their family.
Okay, so in order, if I were visiting someone, say my uncle is there and I want to come visit him, I have to somehow know how to get past that gate. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so what is the process? How does that work?
So we have signs in the parking lot with a phone number to the receptionist. When you approach the gate, there's a sign on the wall that says, if the gate's not, you can call in to this number, or there's a call box just to your left-hand side. If you're in your vehicle and you can't get out of your vehicle, there's also a call box.
So I have to know to drive into that garage before I see that sign?
No, there's signs in the parking lot.
Signs in the parking lot too. Okay. And you said most of your residents don't actually have vehicles. So this
Correct.
79 spaces down there are really, in fact, for visitors and guests who have to get beyond this gated process.
That's correct.
Okay, well, thank you for clarifying.
Mhm.
To follow up on that, so your staff parks outside the gate
No, primarily inside the gate.
as well?
Mhm.
Okay, so the
Behind the
79
gate.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, we need
in
some
the
clarification.
documentation here, it clearly says that the spaces outside the gate are for staff, visitors and staff, doesn't it? Am I misreading?
No, actually on
I
sheet
don't-
A2.8, it says residents, family and staff.
Oh, it
Yes.
says right- oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you.
So we've actually, during this process of Planning Commission and ARB, we have really revamped and strengthened our parking policies. So all of our employees have gone through a checklist on our human resources software, where they've read a memo and they agree to it. We've also handed it out to our residents' families and our staff of our new, these kind of strengthened parking and transportation policies.
Yeah, I believe you have worked hard with your staff. That seems to be true. So I think we'll
Thank
get to
you.
it with comments later on, but there might be something else that could be done.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
And just to clarify on the record, it does say, as Board Member Chen pointed out, on sheet A 2.8, it does show the parking per allotment, that everything behind this gate in blue is designated as residents, family, and staff. So
Yes,
it's not just, I
thank
think that
you.
was where the clarification was becoming a little problematic, because we're like 79 spaces for residents that don't drive didn't make
Yeah,
sense.
right, right.
Understanding that the
Yeah.
staff and everything. So the visitors is 18 spaces outside of the gate. Okay.
Thank you.
So,
And then-
Mhm.
Sorry, one quick comment. So when you have a visiting nurse or healthcare provider, would they park in staff or visitor parking?
We have alerted them that they are to park behind the gate in the garage. So they should be coming on site, either calling the reception if the gate's not open or pushing the button, the call button.
Great, thank you very much.
Some of the comments were that, their parking spot was in front of their house was taken. How do you deal with that? And are they simply calling you to say there's a problem here? Is there a communication that you create with the neighbors so that they don't have a crisis in their front yard there?
Well, we have communicated with them. We've been, hosting public outreach meetings. It is a public street, so that is a fact. We do believe that there is a lot of traffic pattern from the Goodwill that's there.
Oh, I see.
It's, there's multiple factors involved. We have now cleaned out our garage. We're finished with construction, generally speaking, on our phase one of the project. And there were a few spots that were taken for construction activities. But there's ample parking in our garage for staff and any visiting nurses or care providers. So we feel that we have done what we can on, to contain it on our property. That is the ultimate goal. But I can't completely control public behavior either. We're doing the best we can to alert and to guide and to suggest and support, but ultimately I can't control anybody's behavior. Many of these residents do have ADUs on their properties, things that are in their driveway. So I can't control that either. That's their personal, decisions to make for their own properties. But when the driveway is impacted, you can't park in your driveway.
So looking ahead, we're going to have a construction project here with a lot of other bunch of cars coming into the community. How are you going to deal with that?
We are going to use we have two properties here. So the Avant building is outside of this discussion, but we do plan to use the Avant parking for our staff if we have to offset any needs underneath the garage. Most of the needs for construction are storage units when we have to store items during construction for their safekeeping. So kind of big bins and things inside. Our contractor is Vance Brown. They've been great. They've been parking a majority of their staff off-site and shuttling in or carpooling in for construction workers.
Okay, yeah.
And the phase two scope, candidly, is less invasive per se than what we did in phase one.
I have a question on parking too. So I know per code, it is required like based on per beds. But since now we include the parking for staff, may I know how many staff do you have on site daily?
It depends because we are shift work. Our heaviest shift is kind of that, late morning to later afternoon, where we have upwards of 50 staff members during that time. The morning shift and the knock shift, the overnight shift, are much less labor intensive.
So behind the gate, are those parkings designed to be designated parking, say one unit have their own parking space, or behind the gate, everyone can park wherever they can.
We've been doing, it's not designated per se right now with numbers or, assignments, but we have allocated a certain area for staff parking, and then certain parking for residents and guests closer to the building on the building side, just for ease of access for our family members. But we haven't delineated anything in writing or assignment.
Sorry to keep asking about parking. One last question.
It's a high intensity issue. We do understand.
So on the top of page 2.8, it says parking per municipal code required is 57, proposed is 57. Is that kind of following on Board Member Chen's question? Is that updated because of the additional 16 units or?
Yes, we have a parking study that was completed by a consultant,
Okay.
third-party consultant of the city. Yes.
Thank you.
Transition here a little bit. I wanted to touch base with staff and possibly the applicant in regards to the noise issue. So in our pre-hearing, we had discussed the noise that actually was apparently coming from what I believe the applicant said was the pool pump from the Avant, the next building over. And it does sound like they are mitigating that by repiping. Was there any other further comments from staff in regards to the noise situation?
I can just add that we have had, email and verbal conversations with code enforcement staff about it.
It's ongoing.
It is ongoing.
Okay. And then in regards to the new heat pumps, there was 2 proposed, there's now 3 proposed, but they're all sort of centrally located. The third one is even farther away from the Wilkie Way residences than the earliest one. And all of those are 53 decibels. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Follow on with the previous noise issue from, now it seems to be from the Avant, but wasn't that the source of that noise was still onto the Palo Alto Commons building somehow? From what we.
No, we reviewed the photos provided by that neighbor and determined that it is the Avant building where the source of the noise was.
So I want to be really clear that now, at our last meeting, I remember the neighbor presenting photos and an audio recording of the sound, saying he was standing in his backyard looking at Palo Alto Commons, and that was the source of the noise. And are you saying now that that's not true, that the source of the noise was the other building, which was quite a ways? Or what am I missing?
So the 2 buildings do not have like a fence between them. It is 2 buildings on the single individual property. I can go back through the emails and pull up the exact address, but we did determine that that property backs to the Avant building and that the photos provided were of the Avant building.
Okay, so it's totally separate from the building we're discussing.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And the mentioned solution will be, if it's completely as described, will solve that problem. Is that correct?
So that is the part that is ongoing. Code enforcement staff and potentially other planning staff will need to review that improvement proposal in more detail. But we are working towards a solution on the issue.
I have a question regarding landscape screening to the applicant. So we received the public comments about the native plants, and you're saying that it may be because of the existing irrigation plan system, it will be overwatering. So I want to know what are the existing conditions there? What's the plants there other than the grass in the courtyard where all the new trees are?
The existing condition of that courtyard?
Yeah.
There's a center grass area with some smaller trees that have been more recently planted. We did have to remove a tree due to illness. We're not removing trees. We love trees on this property. We have a 200+ year oak on the Avant side that actually the owner built around it to protect it in place in cooperation with the city. We have a variety of trees, shrubs, flowering annuals to enhance the look and feel of that courtyard. I guess we have a landscape subcontractor who monitors and corrects drip irrigation when necessary. So we have a third-party landscaper who's on site and handles our irrigation.
So although on the site plan, it doesn't show any existing trees there, but there are some smaller trees and
Yes.
shrubs there? Okay.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
absolutely. That courtyard is very well populated with landscape.
And I have a question to the staff. So for the privacy and transition to residential uses, and the code require like if the windows to, if within 30 feet from the window, is it window to window distance, or is window also include to open space?
So the objective design standards are a recommendation from the Architectural Review Board for this project to meet. Because it is a planned community project, it is not necessarily required to meet the objective design standards. The applicant, like any other part of the zoning code, would be asking for exceptions as a part of the approval process. But to answer your question, I just, I'm stalling to pull up the code a bit. The exact language is within 30 feet of facing residential windows, and therefore it would be window to window.
Okay.
And for the sake of this project, the plans are mostly dimensioning to the property line. Because this is an R1 neighborhood, most of the homes are presumed to have a 20-foot setback, although as others have noted, there are a number of ADUs on the neighboring properties which can have setbacks as little as 4 feet or even as little as 0 feet if it was converting an existing detached garage built on the property line.
Okay, thank you.
Well, to follow up on that, though, to the applicant perhaps, but the code says 30 feet window to window. We asked the applicant to document more carefully compliance with that code. You have one window facing the neighbors that's 21 feet from the property line. What's the distance to the nearest window, please?
Yeah, so that window is going to be on sheet 5.27, and the nearest window would be probably another 20 feet past that property line, so 40 feet would be the nearest window, and that's to the ADU that they have in the backyard.
Could you direct which page is that?
The last page, so 5.27, and then it's on the far left is that window that we're
Yeah,
talking
to
about.
clarify, it's about third to last, and it is the window all the way to the right side of the building. It's indicated to be 20 feet 11 inches from the ADU, which does not have any windows facing the property line. And then the house can be seen beyond, although the potential location of rear-facing windows is not within the extents of the plan.
For graphic clarification, if it's my understanding that the dark gray squares on this document are the windows.
Yes, yes.
So staff, could you confirm then that their window does comply with our objective standards?
Yes.
Thank you.
Looking at the board, seeing if there's any further questions.
Well, we haven't talked too much about the trees, but it's a pretty confusing subject matter here. Some people seem to want evergreens, some people want deciduous.
Low water. not.
Everybody's shaking their head.
Is the specified tree a native plant, this sweet shade?
Well, we've had some discussion about that. Our landscape architect, Tim Davis, is also on the line. He's recommending trees that he believes will be successful in this location.
That's not quite my question.
He has provided an alternative native species tree, however, with some languaging that he's not sure based on its root structure and canopy that it would be successful with the existing trees that are in this kind of tree line. He is recommending a tree that is a non-native as the primary tree because he believes it will be viable and well-suited to this tree line and the canopy.
So it's a long answer to the question,
Yes.
which is no.
We've offered an alternative with the caveat, a star, that it may not be successful, but we want to work with the neighbors, and if they want a native tree species in that area, we will accommodate that and plan it. We have no objection to working with them on what trees they would like to see.
What is the native species that the alternate recommendation?
Is Tim on the line? I'd like Tim to address
Yes.
it. Yes, if you could.
Yes.
Just allow Tim Davis to respond to that.
Through the chair.
Please.
Can you hear me? Hi,
Please,
well,
if you don't mind.
there are a handful of native species that are available to the Palo Alto area, and it would either be an oak or an incense cedar. However, those are very large trees, which would impact then the shade aspect that the residents have expressed a concern with. So one of the reasons, that's another reason why we've kind of shied away from using a native species in this area. Again, the environment that we're talking about is a non-native environment where introducing a native plant into that environment is not conducive to one or the other, because in order to successfully grow a native plant, you need to have a lot less water usage. We're talking about planting in a turf area, which needs more water. So what's going to happen is we're going to either cut back on the water on the turf or the other shrubs, and we're going to lose those plant material, or we're going to increase the water or keep the water the same, and it's not conducive to a native plant success.
For my clarification, this sweet shade is an evergreen,
Yes,
and then it's an oak and a cedar. Are those evergreens?
yes.
Okay. We also had heard commentary from one of the neighbors that the root structure of existing trees was impacting her property. Could you please explain maybe some of the difference between this sweet shade versus oak and cedar root structures so we could understand that a little bit better?
Well, an oak tree, for example, most of the oak trees are widespread canopy trees, and that root structure is going to extend to the edge of that canopy over time. The sweet shade is a much more narrow and upright canopy, so it's not going to have as wide of a root spread. Besides that, where we're indicating planting the sweet shade would be closer to our building and not close to the property line. So we're probably going to be, I think the closest one is probably 10 feet from the property line, and that. So I don't see that as being an issue. I would be more concerned with, the larger canopy trees.
So to sort of summarize that, the sweet shade is being proposed because it has a smaller, more upright footprint. It'll have a reduced root impact. It is evergreen versus the oak that would be a larger root spread, larger canopy spread, although native versus non-native. Is that accurate?
Pretty accurate, yes.
Okay, thank you.
It's not necessarily the reason for the suggestion of the sweet shade as a solution to this condition. With our meeting with the residents, they expressed a lot of concern over trees providing additional shade to their yard versus screening. And I think what we got to was a tree that would provide screening of their yards versus providing additional shade. So that's why we chose a tree that was more narrow and upright and not spreading to create more shade, but yet still provide that screening.
Understood. Thank you.
Staff, could you clarify for me, please, then? I believe it's our Architectural Review Board findings that require use of native species. Is that absolute, or is there some language that allows variation on that? I'm just trying to get a sense of what's required here versus what seems to be practical.
Agreed. And also sort of having some commentary on what the neighbors feel about oaks versus sweet shade, things like that. So just because the goal of this really is to work with the neighbors and provide them. And I understand there's several voices with several different requests and requirements, but understanding sort of what might be the best possible solution, right? Given the circumstances.
Yeah, the exact language of the finding is landscape design complements and enhances the building design and its surroundings, is appropriate to the site's function, and utilizes to the extent practical regional, indigenous, drought-resistant plant material capable of providing desirable habitat that can be appropriately maintained. So the intent here is, to the extent practical, and for many projects, it is appropriate to provide native landscaping. However, particularly in this case where the screening situation is sensitive, it may be appropriate for the ARB to consider what will thrive best in the setting.
Thank you.
I just wanted to address your comment. Yeah, we took the emails and the meeting notes and kind of, even though we've got a lot of voices in this discussion, it seemed like we landed on most residents don't want more shade in their backyard. They already have enough shade based on existing conditions. So we didn't want to impact that additionally. And then working with them kind of neighbor by neighbor, kind of cultivating the landscape plan where they would like to see the tree location and the height and the foliage, the spread.
Great. Thank you for the clarification.
I have one more question regarding landscaping that
Please,
came
go ahead.
about from one of the emails from yesterday where it seemed like one of the neighbors preferred extension of the fencing and vine growth instead of trees. Has that already been addressed?
I can address that as it was addressed by email. The maximum fence height of 7 feet per the municipal code is inclusive of any sort of trellis structure, and therefore a tall vine that is required to be supported by the trellis structure would not be allowed per the fence code.
I have a question going forward. Will you, how do you assure the neighbors that you're going to keep the plantings, should a tree die, satisfactory to what you agree with them?
We'd be open to conditioning the project to maintain screening, whatever languaging that would incur to maintain that privacy and screening in perpetuity. Yes.
Okay, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, follow-up question on the trees. So I want to know for the specified trees, how fast will they grow? And to the staff, can we require them to plant it at certain height when they were planted?
So it is typical for us to require new screening landscaping to be planted at the 24-inch box size and be at least 8 feet tall at the time of final inspection. If that should already be included in the draft conditions of approval, but I will double check that.
And I will add, just in general, in terms of planting of trees, planting at a larger size is sometimes possible, but it actually is often not the best way in terms of the long-term health of the tree.
Any other questions from the board for staff, applicants, or public? Okay, at this time, we will close the public portion of this discussion. Thank you to the applicant, and we will turn the discussion inwards. Anyone have comments specifically that they'd like to convince or discuss with other board members?
One thought is that there was a comment, I think, in one of the letters about the color color scheme, and we really haven't discussed that. Shall we just do that internally ourselves here?
Yeah, I think that's great. Personally, I'm just going to throw my opinion out there. I think that the new updated blue is much more pleasant than the previous one. And it does remind me of, I hate to bring this as a reference, but Disneyland and Disney World use two specific shades. One is a go away green and one is a sky blue. And these two shades are, noted as being very pleasant to the eye and that they do fade away. Your eye sort of moves over them. This blue is very close to that Disney blue color. So I have no objections to it.
I particularly appreciate in the colors the composition, which is more varied than is there now with the all green. And so there's the background color and then a few punches of blue that is strong but not overpowering. So I think the composition refreshes the building quite well. So I'm in support of the colors.
I'm going to do my best to speak here for a moment, and so that the camera can zoom in when it does that automatically. If I talk long enough, it will do. There we go. So those are the color palettes that we've got here. So again, just showing that the public and for future reference that those are the colors that we are looking at. Thank you.
Yeah, I support this color selection.
I do too.
Yeah, I don't have issue with that.
Agreed. As far as parking goes, I do want to say, I feel to my fellow board members, I feel like the applicant has taken pretty tremendous strides here to try and improve this parking situation. I completely sympathize with the neighbors, and that would absolutely, someone parking in front of my driveway would ruin my day, if not my week. So that is something that I definitely have a lot of sympathy and empathy for the residents for. And I would just encourage the applicant to continue with the strides that they're taking in terms of the parking situation. And to the neighbors, again, just, as these things come up, there may be a rogue person here or there that does park inappropriately. But if the applicant is really taking it to task to make sure that the parking is appropriate for their staff and for their needs, I think that's really, really important, and that we do not want to see spill over to these neighbors. I mean, this is a big impact on their rear yard. We don't need to be impacting their front yard as well with parking situations. But I do feel that it's, in my mind, I think that they have really shown a good forward progress and pretty notable strides forward and towards to mitigating this issue and sort of hopefully ending it. So thank you for that.
I put a couple of check marks in agreement with you on that. The spirit has been, I think, very cooperative. And we recognize that everybody wants to protect their rear yard and either have shade or non-shade, whichever it would be. And it seems to me that in dealing with them individually, the way you've done is to be congratulated. So I think it looks like to me it's a family affair, and it shouldn't go beyond that.
I'd like to throw a slight twist on all this. So two sides of it. To the neighbors, it's not just Palo Alto Commons. You're next to the Goodwill store, which has a lot of retail traffic and employees and is significantly underparked. So there's pressure coming not just from this applicant. To the neighbors, you have a lot of ADUs and additional uses on your property, which increase density. I'm not surprised that the street is full of cars. You have the option of petitioning to city council to get a residential permit parking program, which is what other neighbors do in this situation. So you have an avenue to solve your parking problem. It comes at a hassle to you, but that's what happens when a city increases in density and use. I think Palo Alto Commons has sufficient parking on site to meet their needs. So it seems to me unfair to pin this back to Palo Alto Commons. To Palo Alto Commons, I think your site has adequate parking, but it's not properly utilized. And I'd like to see staff aggressively work through the TDM program to make it work. I'll say this in particular because every time I've visited that site, I can't find a parking place. And what I do is I see this large dark hole in the ground. I should drive into that, and somehow there's probably a dozen spots, probably there's 50 spots empty down there. Okay, and it's empty because nobody wants to go in that big hole. You need to somehow make it really clear to everybody, come in here. Make it welcoming, maybe make it not so dark, put some better signs. Most people coming there, like me, I'm a visitor, I suppose, but nobody knew I was coming. And the last thing I'm going to do is stop and call somebody at reception and spend 10 minutes getting a gate to open. So get rid of the gate. Solve the real problem, which is that nobody knows you have all this parking. It'll take a lot of heat off of you from the neighbors, and you've got this enormous garage down there, use it. So to me, to staff, it's really, this is a solvable problem through signage and usage. We have a mechanism with the TDM. We have a transportation division which can solve all of this, not the ARB. I'm just sort of passing on my observation. Every time I go there right now, I don't know that the parking is there, so I don't use it.
Just to counter that for a moment, I do think that the 18 spots of surface parking for visitors, again, that is sort of your stopping point. And if you're coming to visit grandma on repeat, you get used to the gate. It's not an issue. I would also argue that maybe in a long-term memory facility, having a gate so that someone doesn't hop in their classic car and drive away is probably helpful. So I think that it's one of those where there's I understand the need for the gate, especially with the memory care facility. And I think that having the adequate surface parking for people who are new, and then they get sort of their tutorial, okay, next time go into the gate. But I do also agree with the dark hole situation. It does look a little bit imposing, and maybe there's something that we can do with lighting or vine planting or something that just makes that look a little bit more inviting. Now, of course, signage is also something that sometimes gets reviewed by the ARB. So I'm not necessarily going to require anything specific there. But I do think that, you know, the darkness of that entryway is notable.
Yeah, I just would like to see the TDM plan conditioned upon that really being reviewed carefully and approved, not by us, but by whoever the city uses for this type of thing.
Right. And I think just to add on to that with the TDM plan, because sound like, you know, in the previous meeting, we also heard, you know, there might be some plan. Is it implemented or not? I don't know if that's something that can be conditioned by parking and transportation of like, you know, regular, maybe at least annual update and making sure everybody coming, you know, new staff members, visitors have a regular update of, you know, the policies. Thank you.
Last item to the board. Do you guys have a strong opinion one way or the other on this sweet shade versus oak, native versus non-native? I'd really like to hear your opinions on that as part of this discussion as well.
I spent some time last night, maybe should have disclosed this, that I was thinking about the landscaping in addition to what's in our documents, and came up with a tree called a Brisbane box, which does in a similar columnar, even more dense shading kind of thing. I think, though, that these applicants have got their hands full satisfying different neighboring requests, and then our sufficient request to get privacy, that I'd rather leave it to the landscape architect, who seemed quite competent to make these decisions. If this is the tree that professional recommends, I'm all for it.
Agreed. It seems to have balanced the size, shading, and I'm not too bummed that it's non-native because there's already irrigation there. So usually we favor native planting to minimize watering, but this does not seem to be one of those cases.
Yeah, I support that.
Agreed.
It really, to me, it comes down to finding a balance between the neighbor's desires to get privacy and shade or not shade, and Palo Alto Commons' desire to have plants that also work for their residents, and just finding a happy middle ground. It seems to me that they're on the path of doing that. And again, through staff, I think that will happen. And again, I hope staff feels empowered to be the arbiter of what's really the fair solution by listening to the neighbors.
Agreed. I would also like to commend the applicant on their sun shadow studies. I think that those were extremely helpful, and especially highlighting where the impacts would change. The most notable one, as was reviewed last time, as well as this time, being a slight portion of shading that falls on one of the ADU roofs, right? So I think that's an incredibly helpful document, especially in a situation like this where you're really showing that you're taking the concerns of the neighbors seriously, and you really did a very thorough evaluation of that. So I do commend you for that. And it's very easy for us to understand and interpret that. So thank you. Okay, any other comments or discussions? Do we feel ready to vote?
One other item I
Please.
want to comment and commend on is really about the windows, the locations that the applicant has updated in response to the neighborhood, and also making sure that residents at Palo Alto Commons have access to outside views, the landscaping that we've talked about so much. So I feel like what the current project really addresses all of that and is a good balance. So I commend you on that. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, just one final thought on that exact same line of thinking is I think that this project as a whole, because of the fact that it is sort of a zigzag shape, it's not one big wall going down the back of Wilkie Way, I think does make a tremendous difference to how these neighbors are impacted. And I appreciate that this was sort of continued along that vein, that it's really not trying to flatten out the whole thing and capture all the space. It's trying to sort of fill in these smaller pockets. And I think that does make a tremendous difference to the impact on the neighbors versus having one long, massive wall. So, okay, at this time,
I'd
Peter?
just like to go on the record. I do support the level of privacy impact that the applicant has achieved through, I'd like to say through compliance with our objective standards. I believe that having the windows at an angle, reducing windows that face the neighbors, keeping the windows facing other people's actual windows, all contribute and make a difference. To the neighbors, it's not a perfect solution. We're a growing city. We're adding density to the city, and we have to all fit together. But as Board Member Rosenberg said, if this were one large building with a single wall adjacent to your property, it would be a lot worse. So I feel good that this is a good compromise. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Peter. All right, at this time, I'd like to call for a vote. Do I have a motion?
I'm sorry, can I make one other comment? I wanted to be sure I put this out there.
retract my call for vote.
So on packet page 21, there's a section called zoning compliance. And what it discusses is about the amendment to the PC zoning is supposed to come at some public benefit. In this case, it rationalizes the public benefit as being additional care for senior citizens or care for this type of resident. And I strongly support that. And I'd like to go on record for that. And I'd like to see the whole board actually support this rationale for making this amendment change. It's important because the concept of a PC amendment should produce a public benefit is something that's important. And I'd like us to strongly endorse that notion as well. Thank you.
Wholeheartedly agree, and I appreciate you putting that on the record and sort of speaking to it formally. It is obviously noted in the packet page, but I think that it is important that we as a board make a pretty strong stance that public benefit is something that we want this city to be doing. And we have an aging population. You know, a lot of people have been here since the 60s, 70s, and we need to make sure that these people can gracefully age in place in a city that they call home. And I think that by allowing more projects in this vein is really going to help keep that a reality. So thank you.
So I'll move the project as presented.
Second.
And this would be again a recommended approval of the proposed project to City Council based on findings and subject to approval. Conditions of approval. So we have a motion. We have a second. Can we get a call for vote, please?
Board Member Adcock,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes.
Board Member Balte,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chen,
Yes.
Chair Rosenberg.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you all. Thank you to the applicant. Thank you to the public speakers. We really do appreciate your time and efforts on this project. We do take your concerns very seriously, and kudos to you. We look forward to having more space available for our seniors. Okay, on to the next item on the agenda. We have an approval of minutes. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes? Okay, nothing. On that note, sorry, was there something? Okay. On that note, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as drafted.
Second.
Can we get a vote?
Board Member Adcock,
Yes.
Board Member Balte,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chen,
Yes.
Chair Rosenberg,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
Next, we have board member questions, comments, and announcements. Do we have anything from board members? Any final thoughts from staff?
Yes, I'd like to point out that at the city council meeting this coming Monday evening will be two items that I think are of interest to the ARB. I'd like to, through the chair, request someone be there or address the ARB's positions. The first one is the ARB work plan will be presented and hopefully accepted by the council.
I will be there for that.
The second one is that there's a memo to colleagues put forth by council members Lowing and Koo regarding modifying the way cell phone tower applications are reviewed, requesting that all of them be sent back to the ARB for review. That's something the ARB spent a lot of time on in the past, and I'd like to see us at least be there for council to ask any questions of.
Will that be at the same Monday hearing?
That's, I believe, agendized for Monday, the last item.
The last
So
item,
yes,
okay.
it's late at night Monday.
So I will be there for the ARB portion of that, and I will happily stay on until the cows come home to listen to that one. Actually, ironically, my mother pointed that out to me, that it was, she read about it in the Palo Alto and the Daily, and was like, oh, you guys are going to get to review these now. So I need to read that article, and then I'll be listening in on that city council meeting. So thank you for that. Yes, that is something I will be in attendance for via Zoom, if not in person, probably via Zoom.
Yeah, I'm planning to make a statement on that issue as well.
Excellent.
Just because I was sort of lived through that whole debacle with those things to begin with. And because I'm not terribly excited at the way the staff has interpreted our direction on that one over the years. So.
Great. Okay, excellent. Anything else? All right, with that, our meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all. Appreciate it.